Namo Guru Be Namo Buddhaya Namo Dharmaya Namo Sangaya Namo Guru Be Namo Buddhaya Namo Dharmaya Namo Sangaya Namo Guru Be Namo Buddhaya Namo Dharmaya Namo Sangaya Namo Triratnaya. So, good morning everybody, and with this short homage to the Triple Gem, I would like to continue with my discourse or my talk on the Ganden oral transmission lineage as I commenced or began with yesterday. But I need a sip of water. Just to reconstruct on the discussion already overgone yesterday in the sense of a summary, a synopsis of what we have already spoken about, I mentioned the fact that I dwelt on the fact of the transliteration or the meaning of the term oral transmission lineage, ear-whispered lineage, closed lineage, terms which are applicable and which are used currently, depending on the academician or writer or person concerned. All of these terminologies are used. And the meaning of that is the proximity or closeness with which the transmission concerned has been given. Normally, the nature of the transmission is referred to an esoteric nature of transmission, which is probably a summarical presentation of the Sutra and the Tantra teachings. Because it is the Sutra and the Tantra teachings, I mentioned the fact that the Sutra here relates to the common basic foundational teachings, which are sometimes described as the Hinayana teachings or the lesser vehicle or the small vehicle teachings, and also the Mahayana, which refers to the large vehicle. Let me just make a small point over here. The large vehicle or small vehicle is in no way derogatory in the sense that, the vehicle, the Hinayanist vehicle or the small vehicle is not being called small because of its puny or very, undesirable nature of goal or its proposition. It doesn't really mean that. It just means that the goal is not larger in comparison to that of the Mahayana, that it is related to self-liberation, the goal of self-liberation, and that the Mahayanist goal, on the other hand, is that which abandons the goal of self-liberation, and it aspires to a goal which is larger in context because it refers to the goal of supreme enlightenment, a goal which is motivated or aspired for the sake of all sentient beings, in the sense that it aspires to reach the state of enlightenment so as in order to be able to take all sentient beings to that state. So, because of the magnificence or the munificence, if you might call it, the magnificence or the munificence of the objective and nature of that goal, therefore it is called Mahayana, the large vehicle. It's important to say that because some people easily construe that it is followers of the Mahayana who tend to belittle the followers of Hinayana, or the followers of Hinayana themselves assume or presume that this is the case. It's not necessarily the case. This is just only a clarification which, because we are discussing the subject, it's good. Apparently, what is called Hinayana is a goal that involves the Shravakas and the Pratyeka Buddhas, that is the hearers, those within the audience of the Buddha, that construe those aspiring to the goal of liberation. The people or the protagonists are called hearers and solitary realizers. There is a typical reason why they are called hearers and solitary realizers. I would say it's better not to dwell on that right now, because it will take away our discussion from the main subject. But it's also interesting to know why within the Hinayana followers, there is a section of the audience known as hearers, called hearers for the reason whereof, because there is a different definition to that, and those who are called solitary realizers, that the fact that there is a definition to that too. So it makes a distinct delineation for as the reason to call them hearers and solitary realizers. This is something which which you can later on look into and get an understanding, a better understanding for why these two categories of beings within the audience are called Hinayanists. As for Mahayanists, it is not a graduation, it is not a degree, or it is not an honor or anything as such. It is just a classification of those who aspire to a broader goal, a broader concept of a broader goal, which I've already mentioned right now. Again, when we speak of the Vajrayanist or the Mantrayanist, the Vajrayanist and the Mantrayanist are practitioners of a path or an approach which, although looks contradictory or radical to the approach of Sutra. For example, when we say the Sutra path or the Sutra approach, we also call it the common foundational approach. The common foundational approach is necessarily a terminology imputed to the Hinayanists and to the Mahayanists to indicate that is a foundational, those are practitioners of the foundational goal. Foundational goal here in the context or the meaning of that is those who practice the exoteric goal, not the esoteric, the exoteric goal. The exoteric goal or the exoteric nature of teachings are those kinds of teachings that are necessarily open to the wider audiences and the wider public, and which is as you can probably even call it, easier or approachable, or something that can be understood and something that can be followed. Now, when we say that, it doesn't necessarily mean that the Mantrayanist goal is not something that can be followed. The Mantrayanist goal can be followed, but with the ground foundational training and development in the basic Sutra approach. Like as I am saying, the common foundational approach, the Mantrayanist goal becomes easy to practice. Otherwise, without the foundational training, it is not easy to be able to practice or immediately incorporate Mantrayana practices into the path. Now, there are aspects of the Mantrayana which look like Mantrayana but are not necessarily Mantrayana. Say, for example, practices like visualization, mantra recitation. Visualization here means visualization of what you call the enjoyment body forms of the Buddhas. Okay, the deity forms, the enjoyment body forms of the Buddha, the mantra recitations related to the enjoyment body, deity forms, etc., more or less called visualization. Okay, in that sense, self-generation, in-front generation, visualizations, etc. These are necessarily called Mantrayana practices. But does that constitute Mantrayana necessarily? Not really so. The essence of Mantrayana practice is when you can take desire, when you can take desire or afflictions into the path. Desire here relates to the three. Desire is a part of the three poisons explained in the Sutra, that is desire, hatred, and delusion. Afflictions are greed, hatred, jealousy, delusion, etc. These, when they are transformed into the path, when they are transformed into the path by virtue of also taking bliss and emptiness as the maintained aspect of practice. Again, the practice that involves the transformation or the metamorphosis of the three, which is called death, intermediate state, and rebirth. The metamorphosis or the transformation of death, intermediate state, and rebirth into that of Dhammakaya, Sambhogakaya, Nirmanakaya. Dhammakaya is the truth body, Sambhogakaya is the enjoyment body, Nirmanakaya is the emanation body. So, that which has the capacity to be able to transform these three states is the practice of the Tantras. Now, of course, this is not necessarily a discussion involving what exactly Tantra is, what exactly Sutra is, but because the discussion of Ganden oral transmission does involve these aspects, so this was only just a brief interruptive explanation, if you might call it, interruptive explanation. That is, I just pushed it into it just for clarity, nothing more, just for clarity. Now, as I was saying yesterday, the Mahayanist teachings or the Mahayanist exposition, doctrine, call it whatever, came as a radical approach to the Hinayanists, so it came within a background of controversy. It didn't come just, spontaneously like that from nowhere, and it wasn't accepted immediately. It took at least 1 century possibly, or decades, for it to be incorporated and accepted into mainstream Buddhism. And as it is, the practitioners of the present Mahayana, not the present Mahayana, let us say the practitioners of the Hinayanist, who in the long term came to be known as the Sthavira tradition holders, Sthavira practitioners, that is the tradition of the elders. They came to be later known as the current or contemporary Theravadan followers. So today the Theravadan practitioners are necessarily direct descendants of the Sthavira school, and the Sthavira school has its root in the Hinayana school. But as a mutual what you call act of respect for each other, we do not use the term Hinayana, just because of the idea or the misconception that it is a derogatory term. So we do not use this term Hinayana in that context. But when we do try to explain the Mahayana teachings within the context of the Hinayana, we do use the word Hinayana occasionally, but that is only an academical term. That is not a derogatory term. Okay? So now, as I was saying, the Mahayana teachings came under a controversial background, and also yesterday's discussion I tried to explain the same was with that of the Vajrayanist background. Now, just so that you may have some idea as to why these different diverse paths, you may call them different diverse paths, why these paths, contributed to controversy, there needs to be a small understanding of the reason in simple terms, okay, in just a very abstract and a simple term. Sutras, for example, the foundational teachings which involve the Hinayana and the Mahayana, which we call the Sutra teachings. Sutra teachings involve training of the mind, subjugation, subduing the mind, taming the mind, and refraining from the three poisons or abandonment or rejection of the three poisons and afflictions in order to achieve the goal of enlightenment. The process of the goal of enlightenment is said to be reached in three countless aeons. Now, if you have to count one aeon in itself, it involves million, trillion, billion years. And if you involve three countless aeons, then you can imagine how long that is. But Sutra explains it, and Sutra offers a path whereby it implies or it clearly states that if the perfections involved, like for example, it speaks of the six perfections. The six perfections are the perfection of generosity, the perfection of patience, the perfection of morality, the perfection of meditative concentration, the perfection of wisdom, etc. These are what you call the six perfections. And so if the six perfections are practiced along with the training of the body, speech and mind in being able to overcome the six poisons, and the nature of the 12 interdependent links are understood, and precisely the root of samsara or cyclic existence, which is beginningless ignorance, is cut or annihilated or destroyed, then one can reach nirvana, the goal of nirvana, and that is according to the Hinayanis, and for the Mahayanis, it is one can reach Buddhahood. For the Mahayanis, the goal of reaching Buddhahood is the realization of the lack of inherent existence of both beings and phenomena. For Hinayanis, the lack of inherent existence in beings is sufficient to reach the goal of nirvana, which is not enlightenment. Nonetheless, the foundational practice or the training is the same. The foundational practice and the trainings go on the same level and the same foundation. Same in the sense that it is abandonment of the three poisons in summary. It is abandonment of the three poisons in summary. It is adoption of the six perfections in theory. And accordingly, with the training in wisdom, there are the only differences of the realizations, which I already mentioned, in the case of Hinayana being the realization of the lack of inherent existence of beings, and in the Mahayana being the lack of inherent existence of beings and phenomena. Now, this is not the only thing that makes what you call the so-called division of the Hinayana and the Mahayana. There are even many more things to speak of, to talk of. But in summary, it should be that. But then, as you can see with this presentation, what I'm trying to say is that the Hinayanis and Mahayanis as a foundational practice of goal or as a foundational training, they both seem to have the same or the similar kind of training. With regards to moral ethical discipline, the training is the same. With regards to annihilation or destruction or what you may call extermination of the three poisons, because the goal is extermination of the three poisons. Therefore, the three poisons are purely abandonments. Abandonments here means absolute destruction, absolute annihilation, something not to be taken as even a subtle baggage within the path. It has to be completely relinquished, destroyed, left. This is the goal of the sutra practice, the sutra foundational practice. Now, the Mantraana practice, on the other hand, also talks about the training of these foundations, but it takes an about turn. An about turn, you understand, it takes a different curve. It takes a different curve while training in the foundational basic practice. It says that the three poisons or the afflictions are not necessarily abandonment. They are not necessarily that which is to be totally annihilated. They are that which is to be taken into the path. Taken into the path and used in order to generate bliss. And the bliss here spoken of is, not necessarily a gross bliss. The bliss here spoken of is generally described as spontaneously arisen bliss. The spontaneously arisen bliss. So, in order to generate bliss, whereby that training assists, or that training helps in being able to realize emptiness. Emptiness here means the lack of inherent existence of beings and phenomena. Okay, that is a very what you call simplified explanation of emptiness. So that helps in being able to that approach helps to be able to realize emptiness directly, and the experience is much more powerful and it's instantaneous, and it is not, although gradual, it is much quicker. It is called the quicker way of being able to achieve enlightenment. The quicker way, or you can call it the quickest way to achieve enlightenment. So what is the difference in the Mantraana or Vajrayana approach is the fact that the Mantrayanist or the Vajrayanist practitioner does not want to wait for three countless aeons. It says that three countless aeons is a terrible amount of time by which you have to wait until you get enlightened. If there was a way to get enlightened quickly, it would be better. And there are what you call approaches in the Vajrayana which says that if there is a way to get enlightenment quicker than quick. It's all vocabulary, mind you. It's all vocabulary, quicker than quick, quick. You might think, what is the difference between quicker than quick and quick? They are all the same. It's the same quick being used here. But language and expression and vocabulary are very important. They formulate the understanding of deeper and more subtle nature of realizations or paths. And that's why it's necessary to be attentive, or let us say to be cautious about the usage of vocabulary. So when I say quicker than quick, Vajrayanists or the approach of Vajrayana is such that it probably looks like a person or individual in a great hurry, has no time. So it sounds like it is somebody who or that does not have any time and wants to reach the state of enlightenment as quickly as possible. So therefore the application or the use of the word quicker than quick. Now, is there that possibility? That possibility is there. Yesterday we spoke briefly about those possibilities. Now, just to explain why and how it becomes quicker to be able to attain enlightenment in the Vajrayana approach is that which I have already explained right now. The abandonment of the three poisons or afflictions is a way that is considered to be slower. Taking the poisons or afflictions into the path is considered to be quicker. But that gives a kind of a delusional kind of an interpretation of the idea that many people then start thinking that in the Sutra practice, it's all about renunciation and destruction of the three poisons. In the Mantrayana practice, it is about having a holiday or gala free time with the three poisons. This is a misconception. This is not the case. The objective of both the Mantrayana and the Sutrayana, okay, mantra and tantra, the objective or the goal or aim of sutra and tantra is annihilation of the three poisons, destructions of the three poisons. Why? Simply because the three poisons does not benefit in any way whatsoever. Why it does not benefit in any way whatsoever is a very lengthy discussion. You need not worry and you need not think that there is no explanation why destruction or annihilation of the three poisons is a very lengthy goal, and why the utilization of the three poisons in the path is a quicker goal. There is a very extensive explanation to that, but we really can't indulge in that right now. We have to go point by point to the real topic of discussion, which is the Ganden oral transmission. So therefore, the contrast here in the tantric approach is that Tantra uses three important factors, three fundamental factors, and talks about the immediate need of transforming these three factors or these three topics or aspects, three aspects or three topics or three factors into the three Buddha bodies. Okay? That is death, intermediate state, and rebirth. Now, there is also a reason for stating that, because death, intermediate state, and rebirth, these are three very powerful moments in existence, in samsara. If you know the techniques, if you know the way how to do the trainings, and if you can precisely at the time of death use those techniques and training in transforming death, it is attained very swiftly. The result or the goal is attained very swiftly, wherein you can transform death into the state of the truth body. The truth body is called Dhammakaya. It is called a body not because it's a physical gross body. It is called a body because it is an embodiment of the nature of wisdom and compassion and non-dual bliss and emptiness. Let us just put it simply as that. There is much more description of the Dhammakaya, but leave it at that. It is called the sphere of reality. It is called the body of truth. It is called embodiment of the nature of wisdom and compassion and non-dual bliss and emptiness. And that is called the body, the Buddha, the nature of Buddha body, the nature of Buddha body. Okay, you should not think of it as a gross form or anything as such. Sambhogakaya form, it's called the enjoyment body. It is called the enjoyment body because it has 5 characteristics. Okay, the 5 characteristics relates to qualities related to the realm or to the environment, and other qualities related to the form and the nature and aspect of what kind of instructions are imparted by that embodiment form. Sometimes it's called enjoyment. Sometimes it's called dream body. It is referred to as dream body. It is referred to as illusory body. It's referred to as phantom body. But, that's only to give the impression of the understanding that it is a body, but it is a very subtle body. It is made of subtle winds. The very root cause or the root cause of that body is within the dream body of all sentient beings, and it is in the intermediate state body of all sentient beings. Let me explain it and put it as that. But leave the discussion at that because we cannot go into details of that also. Finally, Nirmanakaya or emanation body. Emanation body is the very gross, let us call it the gross body. The gross body because in the sense that it has a form, it has a physical form, it is gross, because it consists of the 5 aggregates and 5 sense tactile objects and 5 sense factors. It is a gross body. Within the emanation body, there are what you call the very gross nature, the very gross nature of the body, and just the gross body. Okay? Sometimes it's referred to as supreme emanation body and the degenerate form. These are the various ways of describing it. The degenerate form here relates to the human body of six impurities. Okay? The human form of 6 impurities. Called degenerate because it is subject to change, transmigratory nature, and death, and imperfections, and what you call, what you can say, the conditioned nature of birth. Because of these characteristics, it is called degenerate form. If you still don't understand what I'm talking about, degenerate form, it is you and me, put in simple language. You and I are the so-called, vessels of the degenerate forms. Okay, there's nothing more to explain about that. The degenerate form. The degenerate form is called the gross emanation form. That is to say that if a Buddha takes a very ordinary form of a deluded sentient being, insane sentient being, lustful sentient being, intelligent sentient being, scheming sentient being, etc., whatever that be, it is called the very gross degenerate form. If a Buddha takes the form of an enlightened being that is appearing in this world to perform the 12 deeds, I suppose you may have heard the Buddha, Shakyamuni, for example, is just one example. But any Buddha that appears in this human world will perform 12 deeds, okay? Those 12 deeds are the characteristics of a supreme emanation body. Also, they have 32 major and 80 minor signs in their body. Again, the 32 major and 80 minor signs are not the topic of discussion over here. If you want to look into the details, you have to see what you call the Uttara Tantra of Maitreya Buddhas. Maitreya Buddha's speech is collected in the five treaties, and one of them is known as Uttara Tantra. And then the other which is what you call the commentary to the Prajna Paramita, which is known as Abhisamaya Alamkara, the ornament of realization. There again you will find a description of the 32 major and the 80 minor signs. So please look into there, you will find it there. That is the characteristic of the supreme emanation body. Okay, the supreme emanation body. So the supreme, whether we are talking about the truth body, whether we are talking about the enjoyment body, whether we are talking about the supreme emanation body as an emanation body, or even the gross emanation body, these are called the bodies of the Buddha. Sometimes the truth body is described as the body of Gnosis, Jananakaya, the body of Gnosis, and the body of truth. There are 2 descriptions given to it, which again sometimes makes it into the 4 bodies. But 4 bodies or 3 bodies, they are not a contradiction of each other, they are one and the same. Okay? So, there is a possibility of transforming death, intermediate state, and rebirth into these 3 bodies. And that too at the moment of death, at the moment of intermediate state, at the moment of rebirth. Okay? These are the 3 what you call states, and these are the 3 bodies. Therefore, the Tantras is therefore also called taking the 3 states into the 3 body. If you look into the Tibetan treatises, it is called Kusum Lamkir. It's a very popular term. If you can remember it, you can ask any of the Geshis, what is Kusum Lamkir, and they will tell you that. If they are in the mood and if they want to tell you that, they will tell you. So this is called taking the three states into transformation of the three states into the three body, which becomes very easy with the related techniques in how to transform the three states into the three body. It doesn't mean, it just doesn't, you shouldn't understand that as something to do with when dying easily transforming into the body and etc. It is not easy. It is while you are living and breathing, if you engage in the technique of the practice, which is already there in all the higher yoga tantric trainings, it is there. You should be knowing, because I believe most of you here have received initiations. Some of you here are already doing Vajrayogini practice. Some of you here are doing some higher yoga tantric practice. You should be knowing this already. So it shouldn't be something foreign or something like you have never heard of. It is something that you're probably familiar with, and that's where you can do that. You can do that unless, of course, you become an adept in that practice. You need to get used to the practice. You need to be prepared so that when death actually comes, you can be like a child when the school bell rings to go back home, is full of joy and exhilaration and excitement to go forth. That is to go home. Just as a child gets exhilarated and excited to go home, likewise when death comes, the moment of death comes, you should not be shivering in your pants or skirts. You should not be sweating. You should not be calling out to all the existing gods in samsara. You should not be crying or screaming or yelling. That you should not be doing. You should be completely confident and completely joyful and completely relaxed, so that you can understand the dissolutions taking place, what is taking place, the earth element dissolving into the water dissolving into the air, etc., that you can recognize all of that and patiently and with joy and confidence go into each of these dissolutions according to your sadhana practice, and then you will reach the state of clear light and clear light of emptiness, which is Dhammakaya. Okay? So therefore, tantras point out to the very source of samsara. Tantras point out to the very anathema of samsara, okay? Call it the anathema of samsara. Whereas in the sutra, the anathema of samsara is explained as delusion, ignorance, the three poisons. In the tantra, aside from also saying the same, the tantra also says the real anathema of samsara or existence are these three. You might wonder as to why this is not mentioned in the sutra. If this is the case, and this is a superior approach and a superior means of instantly destroying samsara, why is it not mentioned in the sutra? Why is it mentioned in the tantra? The question is not why. The question is the approach, the individual who approaches the path. The individual who approaches the path, if told that they can generate themselves as deities, and meditate during the time of death, so that they can dissolve themselves through these techniques of mantra, seed syllable, etc. You understand what I mean? Are you following what I'm saying? If a sutra practitioner is told about the tantric technique applied, taking non-dual bliss and desire, generating oneself as a deity, etc., to a tantric practitioner, to a sutra practitioner, the transformation into the nature of deity is absolutely unacceptable. That deity is not just a deity, that is a Buddha form, okay? It's unacceptable. Take the tantras, for example, themselves. The highest yoga tantra is where you actually incorporate bliss and emptiness into the path. The actual incorporation of bliss and emptiness into the path, which is practiced by virtue of union, either through taking a concert or either through visualization of a concert, that kind of practice, that kind of training is only adopted in the highest yoga tantra. Not even in the yoga tantra, that is the third, the one below. Also in the yoga tantra, the internalization of practice is accepted only there, but the use of channel, winds and drops are not used completely in the yoga tantra. The use of channel, winds and drops and taking desire into the path or as union of non-dual bliss and emptiness, and the actual adopting of union is only taken in the highest yoga tantra, which is not even taken in the lower yoga tantra, okay? The third lower yoga tantra. Likewise, below the yoga tantra is the performance tantra, wherein one appreciates, wherein one adores the deity and one identifies with the deity there. So the beginning of identification with the deity begins over there. Whereas in the lowest tantra, kriya, action tantra, the approach is only that of admiration, adoration, as it is explained in the tantric treatise, how the approach to desire is formulated in stages, so that those 4 tantras are made easier to be able to adopt by those who will enter the path of non-dual bliss and emptiness but will not engage in union. So therefore, the 4 tantras, okay? Did that make any sense? Okay, hopefully. The approach of the 4 tantra is explained as the lack wherein of capacity in individuals to not be able to accept union, adopt union completely. So therefore, the path of non-dual bliss and emptiness is introduced very slowly, step by step, by introducing into the action tantra, then the performance tantra, then the yoga tantra, then the highest yoga tantra. Now, if this is the case within the approach of the tantras itself, what would be the approach in Sutrayana where there is no talk about union of bliss and emptiness? Okay, this concept is absolutely not there. So when this concept is absolutely not there, where will there be the need to talk about self-generation as deity? Even that concept and idea is not there. That is blasphemy for the sutra follower, okay? That is blasphemy for the sutra follower. Now, if you don't believe or you don't understand, you take your Vajrayogini sadhana or you take a Vajrasattva sadhana. Let's say don't take Vajrayogini because it's shocking. It's shocking. She looks like a woman from one of the red light areas in Amsterdam. It's quite shocking for a sutra practitioner. You try to show it to one of the orange robe bhikshus. If he doesn't collapse, if he doesn't faint in horror, or if he doesn't scold you for showing him that, you are lucky. It is just to say that sutra practitioners will absolutely not accept the idea of self-generation and self-transformation. Again, strong alpha male characters will not easily adopt a practice like Vajrayogini. What? Do I have to see myself as a female with a voluptuous body like this, and etc., naked, totally naked, etc., etc.? You know the description in the sadhana. Precisely, you have to visualize yourself as that. And that may not be acceptable again to an alpha male, and you can't go and say, but this is holy, my guru said so, you are also a practitioner of Vajrayana, why don't you accept that you are also a Vajrayogini? I'm not asking you to be a transgender, this is just only a visualization. May not adopt because of the very strong disposition to being a male. Likewise, a female, if you show a picture of Yamantaka with his erect member, I think, a very typical, female, a very typical female, more feminine than ever, is not going to accept the idea that she is suddenly a, raging blue bull with a buffalo head and a erectile fan, whatever you call it, member. So these are dispositions, okay? These are dispositions, and in Tantra there are always solutions. If not this, is that. If not that, is that. But the path goes to the extent of non-dual bliss and emptiness. So the same way for the Sutra practitioners, this is not acceptable for the Sutra practitioners. This is absolutely contrary to the teachings of the Buddha. This is just another way of explaining to you why Sutra and Tantra look like they are contradictory. They are totally contradictory to one another. Within the Hinayana itself, like the Mahayana looks contradictory to the Hinayana, and then the Vajrayana looks contradictory to the Mahayana and the Hinayana. The fact, however, is these three practices need to be integrated to the extent that the Kadampas created the model. The Kadampa tradition, which came with Atisha in the mid 11th century into Tibet, they created the model which was outer behavior of a Shravaka, that is a Hinayana practitioner, pure moral conduct, inner training of bodhicitta, that is enlightened mind or enlightened attitude or great compassion, and secret training into the two stages of the path, which is the generation stage yoga and the completion stage yoga. This is essentially the model of the Ganden oral transmission teachings also. You need to keep that in mind. This is also the model of the Ganden oral transmission lineage. To say that we or I am a practitioner of Ganden oral transmission lineage, but not to know that the essential nature of practice of the Ganden oral transmission lineage, even if very compact, even if very precise and a summarical approach, is essentially that of adopting the integration of the three vehicles or the three paths into the practice of one sitting, into a practice for an individual in one sitting. This is also a very typical terminology which you will find in a number of the Ganden oral transmission texts, which declares the practice to be the practice or the integration of all the integration of all of the practices into that of an individual's practice in one sitting. Have you ever heard of this terminology? Have any of you heard of this terminology? Aha. Now, that is something you need to keep in mind. You need to keep in mind every day. Otherwise, your practices are going hip-hop here and there and not integrated. The only reason why we don't make any progress in practice usually is because we have no idea what is being integrated. Not only not having an idea of what is being integrated, but also not knowing how to integrate it. Also, when knowing how to integrate it, not knowing how to do that in one session as an individual. You are an individual, I am an individual, right? When we are talking about individual practice, we are talking about you and me, myself and yourself. Let me give you an example. So you get a better understanding of this. When Atisha came into Tibet, he was invited by a great Tibetan scholar and translator known as Rinchen Sangpo. Ratnabhadra, that was his name. Ratnabhadra is the Indian translation, Rinchen Sangpo is the Tibetan. Okay? Now this translator was a 70-year-old man who had gone to India 6 times to get precious texts, treatises and canons, And he was one of the best reputed translators available in Tibet and was speaking 4 languages. He was held in high honor, and the time when Atisha arrived in Tibet, it was a kind of a very active period. It's called the classical era in Tibet. With the arrival of Atisha, it came to be known as the era of Renaissance. That is what it came to be known as. You understand? It was a classical era because a lot of intellectual stimulation, intellectual work, and bringing of treaties from India to Tibet, translation of important works, and things that had been destroyed a few decades earlier were being restored, and because the early lineage of the Nyingmapa was being considered to have been corrupted by many of the scholars. These scholars were Nyingmapas themselves. At that stage, there were no Gelugpas. Okay? There were no Gelugpas. At around that era came the Sakyapas, but the greatest Sakyapa master ever to have come in the history of Tibet and is highly regarded by all the schools was Sakya Pandita. And he and many of the scholars were of the opinion that the early school of the early transmission had been corrupted. Now, the early school or the early transmission of the Nyingma teachings being corrupted is not to say that the Nyingma teachings are non-valid. That is not what I'm trying to say here. It is not. Also, I'm not trying to say here that the Nyingma teachings are imperfect or there's something wrong with it. It's just that the practices were getting corrupt. And the doctrines or the treatises were, the Sutra and the Tantra were being interpreted in a very wrong way and being misused. Now, the extent of what misuse and what corruption had crept is a story in itself which we can't go into details, but it was of very high concern to Tibetan scholars and masters at that moment and at that time. So many of them were going back and forth to India, trying to get the treatises again and trying to revive and renew the teachings. Okay, it was around that time when Atisha arrived, and with his arrival came what you call, the Tibetans speak of it as the golden age or the golden era or the period of Renaissance, because the real development or the authentication of the Buddhist teachings or the legitimacy of the Buddhist teachings were restored, and to a great extent the corruption was arrested. Okay, which doesn't mean that the corruption was arrested in toto, but to a great extent the corruption was arrested. So there were many knowledgeable Tibetans who knew a lot, and amongst them was Rinchen Sangpo. And he did not want to kowtow or go to Atisha. When Atisha arrived in Tibet, many Tibetan scholars and masters sort of paid so-called diplomatic visit, if not really to receive Dhamma teachings, but to pay diplomatic visits to him and show deference or honor him, but not necessarily become his disciples. And there were at the same time thousands of Tibetans who became his disciples. Okay, there were the both. So Rinchen Sangpo was amongst those who did not go for teachings, but at the same time was sort of wanting to sort of make a kind of a diplomatic move, a courteous move to bring Atisha to his center and monastery. So he invited Atisha to his center and monastery, and there were many things that Atisha was totally impressed with. The way his library was arranged, the way he arranged the icons of the deities, because he was also an encyclopedist, so he had a shrine full of all the deities of the higher tantras, the yoga tantras, etc., all in their order. So Atisha looked at all of that. He saw his library, he saw his collection of the deities, he saw very important works from India, and he was very impressed, and he said to Rinchen Sangpo that had I known that you that people like you existed in Tibet, then there was no need for me to come all the way from India to Tibet. This was a statement, okay? Atisha was totally impressed. Now Rinchen Sangpo took Atisha to his temple shrine. He had a 4-storied temple shrine, and he started explaining to Atisha, taking him on the ground floor and saying, in the early morning, I do my action yoga tantra practice over here. And in the midday, I do my performance yoga tantra on the 2nd story. And then, of course, he went to the 2nd story. And then he went to the 3rd story and said that in the late evening, I do my yoga tantra practice over here. And then he said, late in the night, in midnight, I do my highest yoga tantra over here. So when he gave that explanation to Atisha, Atisha said, but all sutra practice, including the practice of Tantra, ought to be integrated into the individual's mind stream into one sitting. Meaning in one session, you do all of these practice. You do not do early morning action Tantra, afternoon performance Tantra, evening Yoga Tantra, and midnight highest Yoga Tantra. You do not do that. You can follow what I'm saying? You can follow what I'm saying? Yeah? Yeah, Atisha said, you do not do that. I did not know such foolish people existed in Tibet, he said. You understand? First he gave him a compliment saying, I did not know such intelligent people like you existed in Tibet. If this was the case, there was no necessity for me to have come to Tibet. But on the next moment, next hour, when he was introduced to this kind of explanation, because Rinchen Sangpo became very confident, thinking that he proved to be very smart. So when he actually introduced Atisha to his 4-storied temple and started explaining to him, then Atisha said, I didn't know that there were such dumb people in Tibet who didn't really know how to integrate all the practices into one individual mind stream in one sitting. Now, this is something which has probably become a new word for you, because if you do not know, the individual mind stream is you yourself, and the one sitting is the one session where you practice. In that, if you do not integrate Hinayana, Mahayana, Vajrayana into one practice, and you still are saying, but how do I practice them into one? Vajrayogini sadhana itself is an integration of all these three. Perhaps you must have missed it when you attended a commentary on the sadhana, or perhaps you did not understand it. So it is time that you understand this, because that will help you to understand Ganden oral transmission lineage, because Ganden oral transmission is all about the integration of these three. Okay. Yesterday itself, what did I say? I said that Ganden oral transmission lineage is basically the pith instructions of the Sutras and the Tantra. The Sutra and the Tantra, when I said that, it means Hinayana and Mahayana. Mahayana teachings, made compact and easily adaptable in few words, and Vajrayana practice also, combined together, and that all is integrated, and that is what you call the Ganden oral transmission lineage. Now, I also mentioned yesterday that lineages or transmissions of lineages as such did not arise or did not come about with the beginning of the Ganden teachings, beginning of the Gelugpa tradition. To think that transmission or lineages is all about the Gelugpa tradition, and that it is not there in other traditions is wrong. It is there. That is why I mentioned yesterday itself that within the Nyingmapa tradition, there is what you call what they state or what they explain it to be as the long transmission lineage, and then the short transmission lineage. Okay? That was yesterday's discussion. If you can recollect that from yesterday, do you remember that from yesterday? Hopefully. The short transmission lineage in itself is divided into into the hidden treasury lineage, the prophetic treasury lineage, the mind transmission lineage, etc. And the hidden treasury lineage necessarily is about, it's called terma in the Tibetan, okay, terma. Maybe you've heard it, maybe you've not heard of it. By hidden treasure, it means that there were esoteric nature of teachings, instructions, or holy objects or relics that were buried or, put under boulders or within caves or even under lakes, under the depths of the lake, or perhaps hidden within space, or hidden within the mind stream of a certain master or an adept, and when discovered, that came to be known as a hidden treasure that was rediscovered. Okay, the discoverer of the treasure is known as Terton Pa. Okay, one who takes out that treasure. Now, we really have no time to indulge and talk about, who are the treasury discoverers, what is their characteristics, what do they do, how do they discover it, and what are the incidences when they have been discovered. Let us put it in this way: most of the teachings or transmitted teachings in the Nyingmapa tradition are said to be discovered treasures. Those teachings are called treasures, okay? When I'm saying treasures, I'm not talking about some kind of a hidden treasure that pirates go to, search for. Sea pirates, okay? Captain Cook, or whatever. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about those teachings, those revelations. They are called hidden treasures. They are called hidden treasures because they are buried, they are to be discovered. When they are discovered by the persons and then they are disseminated, it comes to be known as discovered treasure. So in the Nyingmapa tradition, many of the teachings are discovered treasures. And prophetic treasures and mind treasures are considered to be very precious by the Nyingmapas. The Nyingmapa adherents, they claim, or let us say they assert, that those treasures are direct revelations because you don't have to go through a long transmission of teachers. They are direct transmissions, and they directly come from the mouth of Padmasambhava or the Dakinis. So they are like the fresh breath of the Dakini. What they mean to say by that is that it's fresh croissants or fresh cakes from the oven, that they mean to say. Your cakes are from day before yesterday. My cakes are all from freshly come out of the ovens. My croissant is really crisp and fresh. Yours is 3 days old. Anyway, this is what is meant by the preciousness of the treasure concerned. And it is not like the other traditions of Tibetan Buddhism. It is not like the other traditions of Tibetan Buddhism absolutely do not have so-called discovered treasures. There are. For example, the traditions that adopt the treasures are the same as those that were unearthed within the Nyingmapa tradition. Many of those treasures are also accepted by some of the Kagyu school and some of the Sakya school. The Gelug school, however, accepts only 1 or 2 of such revealed treasures, and the rest it doesn't talk about. It doesn't talk about it, understand? By saying that it doesn't talk about it, I mean it does not want to raise controversy, or it does not want to look like it is playing the devil's advocate. So that's the simple reason why it does not really talk much about the revealed treasures. But in the Gelugpa system, there is there are 1 or 2 or 3 cases of revealed treasures. It is not that revealed treasures are totally rejected. It is just that it is taken with a pinch of salt. If you understand the expression, it is taken with a pinch of salt. Why? Simple reason. Because many so-called revealed treasures were fabricated and hidden in advance by certain dubious figures who wanted to make themselves very famous. And because Tibetans are quite naive and, dumb, and easily believe anything that if you say to them, this fell from the sky, if it's a meteor and it falls on the earth, you can probably go to Tibet and sell it saying, this is a Vajra which was thrown by Samanta Bhadra or Guru Padma Sambhava early in the morning to me, and it's very rare and precious. You will find thousands of people crowding to get the blessings for it. Now, having talked about Tibetans being dumb and naive, what about people here in Europe? I think you will also easily find a naive and dumb audience here in Europe also. If there is a quick fix solution of something that fell from the sky and you do say the same thing over here, I still think you can get an equally dumb and naive audience here in Europe, having spoken about Tibetans. In fact, the naivety and dumbness here in Europe is even much more profound than the ones we find amongst Tibetans. To be precise, what is that? We will talk about later if we get together to drink coffee. Not now. So then, therefore, they speak about a long transmission. They speak about the short transformation. In a sense, it is the long transmission and short transmission. Remember, the teachings came into Tibet with the advent of Guru Padma Sambhava, who was a manifestation of a Buddha, who was a Buddha manifestation. He was considered to be a manifestation of Avalokiteshvara, Amitabha Buddha. So he was a great being. However, he remained for a very short period and short time in Tibet, and he could give teachings only to a very restricted group of the royal family. At that time, the Tibetans were very aggressive against Buddhist concepts and practices and ideas. So there was a lot of opposition to that, because of which Shantarakshita, the abbot who was earlier invited from Nalanda, had to leave Tibet. Because the aggression was so strong, he had to leave Tibet. 10 years later, the Tibetan king said to him, could you come back, because now the hostility has died down. Can you come back? Then Shantarakshita said, if we don't bring a very strong and powerful adept who has supernormal capacities and siddhis and powers to subdue all the very powerful demons and spirits in Tibet, there is no way Dhamma can be spread. So it was then that Guru Padma Sambhava was invited, but Guru Padma Sambhava stayed in Tibet only for 10 years, not more than 10 years. There is a tendency of people who say that Guru Padma Sambhava stayed more than 10 years. It is definitely not so. And generally speaking, Guru Padma Sambhava is believed to have reincarnated as Atisha. Atisha is seen as an emanation of Guru Padma Sambhava, and Tsongkhapa is seen as an emanation of Atisha. So therefore, today in contemporary times, Guru Padma Sambhava, Atisha and Tsongkhapa, they are seen as one mind stream, one and the same person, but manifested in different time, playing different roles. Okay? That is to say, the short discussion, the very short and the very cryptic discussion of the Nyingmapa tradition and what they consider to be very important as a transmission, and what I just now explained in terms of the termas should not be misconstrued and seen as a derogatory reference to the Nyingmapa tradition, as if I'm saying there is everything wrong there is nothing pure there. That is absolutely not the case. I'm just saying there is a possibility of a misinterpretation. All I'm saying is that, yes, there was a degeneration and there was a corruption. because these teachings were so very high and profound that Guru Padmasambhava had transmitted at that time, many charlatans or what you call dubious figures or fabricators came and started doing all kinds of things with the degeneration of the Buddhist teachings 40 years after the departure of the Guru, so that we had this, so that in Tibet there was this problem in the early 9th century, and the problem is subsisted, because of which other traditions arrived in Tibet. Okay, first with Atisha, the Kadampa tradition, then the Sakyapa tradition, then the Kagyupa tradition, then the Shije and the Chonang traditions. All of these traditions later came as a matter of fact because the very persons who were concerned about the degeneration of the Nyingmapa tradition were not Gelugpas or anybody at all, they were Nyingmapa adherents themselves. So amongst them there was this concern that something has to be done about it. Like for example, if you are in touch with contemporary beliefs and religions around happening in the world and critics of religion, generally speaking, you will find from within the religion, within the religions, there are what you call very strong critics who are adherents of the religion, have not renounced that religion, but criticize the corrupt practices within it and its administrative structure and its institutionalized aspect. They criticize that because they want their tradition or their belief to go back to its original sanctity, purity. That being their concern, they become criticizers, or let us say they become critics or they become the devil's advocate. Okay? There is no reason for that. So likewise, as I'm saying, these early people concerned were adherents of the Nyingmapa traditions themselves. They did not reject the Nyingmapa tradition. They didn't say that Nyingmapa tradition is not valid. It was just the concern of the corruption within it that it brought about this movement, as a result of which new schools started coming into Tibet. So the development of the Gelugpa school came at the very end of all of these developments. Now, it is important to understand this because we are trying to, let us say, I am trying to introduce the concept of Ganden oral transmissions from its historical perspective, from its cultural perspective, from the position and the conditions at the time, what Tibet was experiencing with all these developments of all these different schools, and as a result of which it came as the last of the schools to come in Tibet. Because after the Gelugpa school, there has been no other school that came. The Gelugpa came ultimately as the last. So then, what is the Gelugpa school? Okay, the Gelugpa school was the result of the integration of different transmissions found within the Sakya, within the Kagyu, within the Chonang, also the Chonang, and also the Shije traditions, and some of the Nyingmapa practices. Some, not every, some, a few. What you will find is that today, in contemporary times, the Nyingmapa practice of Dzogchen, which is very widely known and which is very popular amongst Nyingmapas, and probably many non-Nyingmapas also do know or have heard of this practice, the great perfection, Dzogchen. Generally speaking, all the Gelugpas show deference to it and do say that they are very highly advanced practice. They are very highly advanced practice, and they are equivalent to the Mahamudra, and they are precisely the means to reach enlightenment quickly. However, the Gelugpas say that there has been some corruption in this practice. The very scholarly and the very acute, those Gelugpas who are very observant, they do say that there has been certain corrupt interpretations of this practice of this practice. They do not say the practice of Dzogchen itself is corrupt. That has never been said. Okay? But they do say that there are aspects of the practice in contemporary times into which, because of the practitioners themselves, certain corruption has entered into it. Okay? Certain corruptions have entered into it, because of which the contemporary interpretation of the practice is faulty, but not the tradition in itself. Not the tradition in itself. Now, this is just the view. This is just the view of the scholarly Gelugpa masters. That view goes across even amongst the Sakyapas. Amongst the Sakyapas, there has been also this, what you call, there have in the past been polemical works refuting the practice of Dzogchen. In those times as it developed, not the tradition itself, but the latter generation of its practitioners. So I think it should be clear to your mind what is being criticized. What is being criticized is not the practice. What is being criticized is the practitioners and how they interpret the practice as. Okay? So therefore, in the Gelugpa lineage was therefore an integration of all of these different practices within the Sakya, within the Kagyu, within the Chonang, from within the Chonang and from within the Shije. What were the practices that got incorporated? How did they come to be integrated and be called Gelugpa? I will just put it in simple words, because although it is necessary to go back to the origin of its founder, Tsongkhapa, who was born in the 14th century, in the early 14th century, and who was the main figure, the founding father or the main figure, but he did not establish, or he did not come to central Tibet to establish a school as such. He never said that he was establishing a school. For example, we do speak of the Kadampa school, Atisha's Kadampa school. Atisha also never said that he was establishing a school. He never said he was founding a school. It just so happens that the followers of his tradition came to be known as the Kadampa followers. And at the time of Tsongkhapa, they came to be known as the early Kadampa followers. Early Kadampa followers or old Kadampa followers. Why? Because Tsongkhapa or his adherents or his followers came to call themselves as the new Kadampa followers. Apparently, new Kadampa or NKT is a terminology now being used by an organization which is widely spread in different countries in contemporary times. Today, we are not talking about that. We are not talking about NKT. NKT, FPMT, some of you, most of you, there are people who have been part of FPMT who are here. We are not talking about your organizations. We are talking about the original New Kadampa tradition, and the original New Kadampa tradition was the Gelugpa tradition. So the Gelugpa adherents referred to themselves, they gave themselves the name, we are followers of the New Kadampa tradition. New Kadampa tradition because it was an innovated form of Kadampa practice, which means that they incorporated practices and techniques into the system which never even existed during the time of the Kadampas. So because of this innovation, they came and they established themselves and they called themselves New Kadampas. However, because the followers of Tsongkhapa would always emphasize their path as the lineage of Ganden. Ganden is the Tushita heaven, okay? Tushita heaven. Now I'm calling it heaven, but you must not take the concept of heaven like in the sense as explained by followers of the monotheistic faith. You see, the monotheistic faith believers and adherents, their concept of heaven is something different. And we don't have a term for heaven. We call it the God realms. We call it the God realms. And also, if it is the abode of a Buddha, of an enjoyment body form Buddha, we call it a pure land. So therefore, Tushita is a heaven, is a god realm, because there are particular gods over there. There are many god realms, by the way. As you know, in the highest desire world consists of 36 god realms. They belong to the king of gods. From the highest in that, it's called the Triyat Sama, Sumju Sotu in Tibetan, 36th, the highest in of that, belongs to Indra. Above that is what you call the realm beyond conflict, and above that is the realm of Yama, who is often referred to as the god of death, Yama. Up until that, the realms are called below the realm of Yama, it is called the realms of conflict. The realms of conflict, because in all of these realms, not just the human realm, I don't have to explain why the human realm is a world of conflict. You would know better. The CNN and BBC and Reuters will tell you that. And I will not have to explain to you, therefore, why from beyond that particular realm, it is called the realms of no conflict. That is Yama, the king, the Lord of Death. The Lord of Death. His world is known as a realm of no conflict. No conflict. And above that is the Ganden, is Tushita. Okay? And Tushita in itself has two spheres. One is the field in which the gods themselves, the gods of Tushita, are born. And then up beyond that is what you call the realm of Maitreya Buddha himself. Yes, the realm of Maitreya Buddha himself. So the realm of Maitreya Buddha is like on the sky above the god realm of Tushita. And followers of Tsongkhapa's lineage used to refer to themselves as Ganden followers, meaning they follow Maitreya Buddha. They aspire to be reborn when Maitreya Buddha will appear in this world as a Buddha, reach enlightenment to become his followers. And they make prayers, they make aspirations after death to be able to be reborn in Tushita heaven. That trend was set by Atisha himself. When Atisha was about to pass away, he said he would go to the Tushita, Ganden heaven. Okay? That's what he referred to. So Tsongkhapa as a later follower, coming 300 years after Atisha, also said that he aspired to Ganden and followed the transmission or the teachings of Ganden, meaning Maitreya Buddha's teachings. Now, there is a lot to talk about that and explain why Maitreya Buddha teachings particularly, why not the other Buddha and so on, but there's no scope for discussion over here. But because of these underlying reasons, Tsongkhapa's tradition came to be known as the Ganden tradition. And this again was a name given by people outside the follower, outside from within the periphery of followers of Tsongkhapa. Okay? This was not the disciples of Tsongkhapa who called themselves Ganden adherents. It was those who were not followers of Tsongkhapa, outside the followings of Tsongkhapa's disciples, who started referring to the disciples of Tsongkhapa as Ganden followers. It was the term Ganden lineage was not used at that time. It was just called Ganden followers. Eventually, Ganden came to be known as Gandenpa, that is adherents of Ganden, and then Ga and then turned into Ga Lukpas, those looking for the abode of joy, because Ga then means abode of joy. So the original name was Ga Lukpa, not Ge Lukpa. Ga Lukpa sounds strange. Well, at that moment and at that time also in the early 14th century, because it sounded strange, it was changed to Ge Lukpa. Okay? That's how it underwent the change. Now these are historical factors. If you can retain the memory of this, well and good. If not, it's not really that important. But it's information. It's information. So I already explained that by the time Tsongkhapa came, Tsongkhapa is often referred to as the real eclectic or the real ecumenical adherent of the Sutra and Tantra school of Tibet. Okay? Because Tibet, the Tibetan Buddhist system, the system of Tibetan Buddhism involves Sutra and Tantra. So therefore, at that stage and at that time when there were no Gelugpa practitioners, Tsongkhapa was simply an adherent or practitioner of the Sutra and the Tantra, Sutra and the Tantra. He studied in the Sakya, faculties, in the Sakya seats. Sakya seats were known and famed for their educational standards. They were very famous when Tsongkhapa came over from Tibet. Tsongkhapa's own very personal guru from his very birth, from his very childhood, was also a Sakyapa master. The man who gave Tsongkhapa his first layman vow was Karmapa, who was a great figure of the Karma Kagyu tradition. So Karma Kagyu tradition was already there when Tsongkhapa had arrived. And when Tsongkhapa came to Tibet, he studied. The first place he went to study was in the Dekung Kagyu, the Dekung Kagyu school. The first thing he studied was medicine and then 6 yogas of Naropa and Mahamudra. So his very first training started with tantric studies, which is a little bit amusingly odd, because later on the followers of Tsongkhapa all adopted a gradual study and focus, beginning first with the Sutra studies only, and later thereby, after a full understanding of the Sutra, adopting the Tantric teachings. Tsongkhapa himself, however, was not like that. The very first thing when he arrived in Tibet, he was 17 or 16, he was 17 years old probably. The very first thing he did was study the 6 yogas of Naropa. Now these are very esoteric practices and teachings. He studied the 6 yogas of Naropa, he studied Mahamudra, and then he studied medicine. He studied medicine and he's supposed to have become a very good doctor also. He said that he became a very expert in the medical field and started having patients until he discovered that it was taking a lot of time from his study. So he went away, moved on. Tsongkhapa never stayed in one particular institution and organization. Wherever he studied, like for example, as I'm explaining to you, he studied first in the Dekung Kagyu. He didn't become an adherent of the Dekung Kagyu. You might be wondering why. Then he moved into the Sakya. He studied in all the Sakya institutes, and his most famous and reputed, highly venerated teacher was Rendawa Shonu Lodo. Rendawa Shonu Lodo. That was his name. Rendawa was his nickname, was his title, something like a title. Rendawa. Okay? His most favorite and his most precious root guru, one of his precious root guru, Rendawa, he was a Sakyapa. And Tsongkhapa's early training and study were all in Sakya Institute. Yet he never called himself a Sakyapa. Then he studied Kalachakra in the Jonang Institute. He never called himself a Jonang practitioner. In fact, the Jonang view, yesterday I may have mentioned, I can't remember exactly, I may have mentioned that the Jonang school view is known as intrinsic emptiness. In Tibetan, Shentong, intrinsic emptiness, okay? And that is very much criticized, that is very much attacked. When I say attacked, it doesn't mean with weapons and swords or daggers or abuses or things like that. It's not, you shouldn't take it literally. Very much attacked means scholarly argument and scholarly debate. The Shentong view or the intrinsic emptiness view is very much attacked, very much targeted. And Tsongkhapa, when he wrote his Lamrim, the last chapter on the section of meditation, he refutes this so-called view of intrinsic emptiness, and he gives many reasons as to he puts many arguments and he gives many reasons as to why such a view of emptiness is not beneficial to the development of the path, especially in relation to enlightenment. It will confuse. It is a wrong view. It is similar to some of the non-Buddhist views of some non-Buddhist schools and the Chan Buddhist tradition. So, therefore, this Tsongkhapa criticized, and this Tsongkhapa, sort of wrote polemical works, indulged in a polemical exposition in his Lamrim with regards to intrinsic emptiness. However, his lineage of Kalachakra practice comes from the Jonang tradition. Again, the Shije tradition of Cho, there is also a Cho within the Gelugpa tradition also. The Cho tradition, the founder of which was the only female protagonist or mistress, you can't call her master, mistress, Machik Labdron, very famous. Those teachings were also adopted by Tsongkhapa. And likewise, as I've already been mentioning, from within the Kamakagyu, from within the Dekung, from within the Sakya, from within the Kadam and the Shije traditions, Tsongkhapa, during his lifetime, went and took all of those transmissions by virtue of his research and analysis, looking back into the origin of the teachings, whether they had their roots into the Indian origins and located itself right back to Buddha Shakyamuni or not. At that stage and at that time in Tibet, except for Tsongkhapa, nobody was really scrutinizing the origins of the teachings in the way he did. There was also a very profound and a very important reason why Tsongkhapa did that. That is, scrutinize the origin and the legitimacy of the teaching by trying to locate it to Buddha Shakyamuni, because many fabricated teachings and lineages also appeared in Tibet which had no origins in Buddha Shakyamuni. Okay? When it has no origins in Buddha Shakyamuni, it cannot be Buddhist teachings. Okay? Because it has to have the concerned criteria to be a Buddhist teaching. When it didn't have that, it cannot be called Buddhist teachings. So to claim that these are Buddhist teachings and yet there is no significant indication in the way of documented evidence that it reaches up to Buddha Shakyamuni, such teachings are to be rejected. Rejected or avoided or just left aside for what they are, because if you want pure legitimate Buddhist teachings, you must analyze them and you must look for their pure origins and source, whether they reach out to Buddha Shakyamuni or not. Incidentally, purity of the teachings, going back to the roots, etc., all these kind of things you hear in many religions. In theory and in practice, many of the religions who talk about going back to its original roots, discovering its purity and its legitimacy and all these things, end up in some kind of a very orthodoxical, puritanical, and what you might call intolerant kind of an attitude or an approach, which is called dogmatic approach. It doesn't help. So if you're talking about going back to the roots and origins, normally, generally speaking, in many religions, that has been the case. Would that also be the same case with that of Tsongkhapa's approach if he also spoke about going back to the roots, locating the origins, the sanctity, the legitimacy of the teachings and so forth? Absolutely not. The answer is absolutely not. Why? Because Tsongkhapa did not create a dogmatic approach. He used logic He used documented evidence, he used logic, and he gave many reasons, many profound reasons. And much of them are visible even today in his collected 18 volumes of work. If that is too much and people say that is a huge pile of pages and books, one lifetime is not going to be enough. You can see the extensive Lamrim itself, and in the last chapter itself, the last chapter on meditation, on the union of calm abiding and deep insight, that chapter where Tsongkhapa eloquently explains the wrong view of emptiness. Because eventually in any practice, in any lineage, in any tradition, in any lineage, in any tradition means whether we are talking about Kagyu, Nyingma, Satya, Gelug, Chonang, Shije, whatever. In any lineage and any practice, its legitimacy and its validity depends on its conduct and view. Conduct and view. What we were talking earlier when we said that there were certain corruptions that had crept into the Nyingmapa practice because of the corrupt nature of a number of its adherents and the wrong interpretation of a number of its adherents, what we are trying to say is that the original Nyingma was pure and undefiled and legitimate and valid practice that was introduced to Tibet a long time back. There was no doubt about that. However, because of certain mischievous or certain fabricators and certain charlatans and wrongly motivated individuals, the practice got corrupted. We are not saying that the lineage itself got corrupted. We say the practice got corrupted. Also, there were many lineages that came in Tibet and disappeared. That is because they became incorporated into other lineages. When we say it disappeared, it doesn't mean to say that it had no legitimacy or no use or use of it as such. What we are talking in the sense is about its incorporation into other traditions and other practices. So now, coming back to Tsongkhapa's way. So as I was trying to explain, Tsongkhapa's looking back to its pure origin, validity, legitimacy, and authenticity, etc., and rigorous analysis was done in the Buddhist spirit. Mind you, remember, I quoted the Buddha yesterday by stating that the Buddha has said this with regards to each and every of his teachings. The Buddha has said to his followers that test my teachings just as a goldsmith tests gold and beats it to its pure form. Do not accept it merely because I am the Tathagata, I am the enlightened one or the Buddha, and because I said that to you so. From that statement, it's obvious that you don't stop with analysis and investigation. You don't accept something just because some claims are made or people say that it has a long descendancy of forefathers from my forefathers and great-great-grandfathers, and therefore it has a hoary past, or that it comes from the sky and the heavens, or it was sent by a flash of lightning on a rock and it appeared by itself, and here it is for you to follow without questioning. Nothing to do like that. That is what Tsongkhapa was doing. Now, if you can understand that, then you have got the point. Therefore, what Tsongkhapa was doing something that was purely in the right Buddhist spirit, trying to discover its legitimacy and authenticity. What he did as an individual became something that became very important for thousands and thousands of his followers. It gave them confidence, it gave them trust, it gave them assurance that these were Buddhist teachings, that these all came from the Buddha, and that they all had their origin in the Buddha's teaching, and the legitimacy and validity of it, whereof therefore was pure. Okay? So in this sense, you will see that in Tsongkhapa was collecting all of the lineages and all of the tradition and practice. You will also see that the most famous of Tsongkhapa's what you call collaboration or assimilation of practice, as he explained, put into a nutshell, was his magnum opus, the Lamrim. Okay, the Lamrim. And this transmission of Lamrim, which means the stages to the path of enlightenment, what it is not something we can discuss right now, but let us say Lamrim became the quintessence of the Buddhist path. Never before was the Buddhist path explained in such a compact manner and such a compact way. Of course, if you are talking about the presentation of the magnum opus of Tsongkhapa, it consists of 1,000 pages. Other scriptures and other gospels are very simple, perhaps 150, or there might be something even today that says it's only in 3 pages. Why give yourself a headache with 1,000 pages? You might find that, and people look for easy solutions and easy escapes. So what is so fantastic about Lamrim? Let's say, just for example, the unique flavor of Lamrim, or the uniqueness of Lamrim, is that the Buddha himself had given so many teachings that they were not systematized and collaborated. Had given so many teachings that so many traditions appeared with so many of their canonical what you call collection, that they could not synthesize them and put it into substance, put it into a summarized, compact version of this is the way you go step by step. So it was Tsongkhapa who came with his Lamrim, and his Lamrim lineage therefore essentially is the Ganden oral transmission lineage, to be precise. If you're wondering why I'm talking about Lamrim in particular, it is said that the Lamrim is the what you call ultimate quintessence of Tsongkhapa's composition or contribution to humanity. Tsongkhapa's ultimate contribution to humanity is his magnum opus, the Lamrim. Now, the Lamrim transmission has a very long, lengthy lineage. It comes from Buddha Shakyamuni and comes down to the Nyingmapa master Lhoda Drupchen Namkha Gyaltsen. So Tsongkhapa's master or root master who gave him the translation of Lamrim was Lhoda Drupchen Namkha Gyaltsen. Okay? This great master was somebody who had direct communion and direct vision with Vajrapani. Again, Tsongkhapa had another master, a Kagyu master, Pawo Doje, Pawo Doje, who used to have direct communion with Manjushri. So, therefore, this and Rendawa. So these were the masters that Tsongkhapa had direct communion with, and Lama Umapa Pawo Doje. Lama Umapa Pawo Doje was the one who conveyed messages to Tsongkhapa directly from Manjushri. So, through Manjushri, Tsongkhapa received various revelations. It has to be called revelation because Manjushri is a deity, he is a Sambhogakaya aspect of the Buddha. So, the revelations that Tsongkhapa received came to be known as the Ganden oral transmission lineage. At that stage and that time, the name Ganden oral transmission was not given. When Tsongkhapa was getting these revelations, he was getting these revelations through the medium of his master, Lama Umapa. Okay, he was called Umapa, Lama Umapa. At that stage, Tsongkhapa did not have direct vision and direct communion with Manjushri. Later on, however, Tsongkhapa, after having undergone what you call purification practices, intense purification practices, where he completed 10 million prostrations, 10 million refuge, 10 million vajrasattvas, 10 million mandalas, etc., all within a 3-year period and 3-year long period, 3 year, 3 month, 3 week, as it usually is said to be. After those intensive practices, he received direct vision of Manjushri. This is mentioned in his biography. However, Tsongkhapa during his lifetime never spoke about these visions. Okay? Now the reason why I'm talking to you about this vision, these direct visions that Tsongkhapa eventually received would be the prompting, or would be the beginning of where he received direct transmissions from Manjushri. These direct transmissions, as I already have mentioned, have been Sutra transmissions, Mantraana transmissions, but mainly in relation to the view and conduct, of the teachings. So when Tsongkhapa received these teachings became direct transmissions. Direct transmission in the sense that Manjushri received those teachings directly from Buddha Shakyamuni and directly from Vajradhara. Okay? Manjushri received those teachings directly from Vajradhara and from Buddha Shakyamuni himself. Okay? Therefore, when he transmitted it to Tsongkhapa, the lineage became a short lineage, it became a short transformation, it became a direct transformation, it became a ear-whispered lineage, oral transmission lineage, closed lineage, for the reasons as already explained earlier yesterday and repeated today. Okay? That this is why it is called oral, this is why it is called closed, this is why it's called ear-whispered. So therefore, the conveyor was Manjushri, the origin was Buddha Shakyamuni. So in this way, Buddha Shakyamuni received all of the lineages, including that of the Lamrim, directly from Manjushri. So it is said that the Lamrim that Tsongkhapa had composed were all the oral dictations of Manjushri himself. That Manjushri himself had dictated each and every line and sentence of Lamrim, which Tsongkhapa, assimilated and wrote down very quickly, and therefore brought forward the whole treatise as such as his new magnum opus. Now, if I say that, some of you might think that, but isn't that plagiary? Then that is not Tsongkhapa's work, that is Manjushri's work. Why did he put his own name as the author of the work? Well, it is Tsongkhapa's work because he worked sweat and toil. He worked with his sweat and he worked very hard to collect the lineage of the Lamrim. So he already had the lineage of the Lamrim through the long transmission. When he received the transmission via Manjushri, even if Manjushri had dictated to him, you cannot then say, after understanding this, that it was plagiarized. The real author was Manjushri. The real author was not Tsongkhapa. It is better to say that both of them together authored Lamrim. But Tsongkhapa, being what he was, low profile and very humble, even the three principal aspects of the path later was something that was dictated by Manjushri. Because Manjushri would occasionally appear to Tsongkhapa, as I said, after his intensive retreat, when for the first time all his obscurations and defilements or afflictions were removed, his negative karma or his obstructions were removed, then he had direct vision of Manjushri. So it was just like you seeing me and I seeing you, that Tsongkhapa was communicating with Manjushri on a daily basis. Okay? So it was not like he was seeing something on a TV or something appear like in the modern technology sense. They say you will not need Skype or you will not need Zoom anymore. You will just come you will just appear on the spot with the person, etc. Like you see in the Star Trek or whatever, these these what you call outer space movie things and all this kind of thing. So that is not the case. It's just like you sitting there and me sitting here, I seeing you and you seeing me. Tsongkhapa would see Manjushri in that way on a daily basis. Where is the proof? Who took a photograph of it? Who was the witness beyond that? Let us leave that at rest right now. You might as well say Amen, Amen for the time being. That is another discussion, we can talk about that later. For the time being, just Amen and Hallelujah is enough. For the time being. Later on we can discuss. You can point out to me, what the hell, what proof do you have to say? And we will talk about that later. I'm still here for 2 days. But when Tsongkhapa thought the Lamrim was too much, 1,000 pages, who will be able to read all that 1,000 pages? He then composed the medium version of the Lamrim. A medium version of the Lamrim in 300 pages, from 1,000 to 300. Later he thought that even that may not be possible for people in the future to read. Then he composed a compact Lamrim. A compact Lamrim consisting of only 12 pages. Then he thought that even that may not be possible for people to read. Then he created his microchip version of the whole Lamrim. He decided he was going to talk about Lamrim in just 3 pages, in just 1.5 A4 size page. The concept A4 size didn't exist even, but it's my interpretation. A4 size, 1 page, okay? So then when Tsongkhapa was just about to do that, Manjushri appeared again to him and said, "But aren't you satisfied with all the dictation that I gave you? Was that not enough? Do you doubt my competency?" Tsongkhapa said, "I don't doubt your competency. I doubt that there will be people be able to read all those pages, even though I composed a large, medium, and a short version. Now I'm compelled to compose something only in 1 page." And Manjushri said, "I see your point. I will help you." And he even dictated the title of it, and he called it 3 Principal Aspects of the Path. And he dictated all the 9 verses in it to Tsongkhapa. So again, you might think that again Tsongkhapa probably plagiarized it. He is not the author. If this was not something known to Tsongkhapa and this was not within his mind stream, then you could have said he plagiarized it, but that is not the case. So then, the oral transmission after all of that, out of all of that, the concern of Tsongkhapa, and out of all of that, Manjushri came forward with a very novel idea. He materialized a book from the thin air into his hands. He materialized a book. It was a small scripture. It was a small scripture, and then he gave it into the hands of Tsongkhapa. And when he gave it to the hands of Tsongkhapa, he gave it in the presence of another disciple of Tsongkhapa, who also was getting direct vision of Manjushri. In the presence of that disciple and Tsongkhapa, Manjushri gave that book and said to Tsongkhapa, "Hand it over only to one disciple in the future, and let that disciple hand it over only to one, and let nobody know about the existence of this book. Don't even whisper it, don't even speak about it to anybody. Hand it over only to the person who is capable and who is qualified to be the holder of this book." And that book came to be known as the Ganden oral transmission, miraculously emanated scripture. It is called, some people call it the Gelugpa magic book. Whatever that means, I don't know. But some people tend to call it the Gelugpa magic book. That is to say that it goes into the hands of only the person who is capable and who is qualified to receive it and keep it. And what is the qualification of this person who receives this book? Is somebody who considers others more important than themselves, somebody who considers future lives more important than future lives, and somebody who observes their discipline at the cost of their life, meaning they're willing to die rather than degenerate in their discipline. Such three criteria or three qualities is sufficient, Manjushri said, for the person who will hold on to this book. So this book was handed by Tsongkhapa to Togden Jambel Gyatso, and from Togden Jambel Gyatso it was handed down to Phasowa Choje. From Phasowa Choje it was handed down to Dharma Vajra. From Dharma Vajra it was handed down to Ensapa Losang Thundrup. From Ensapa Losang Thundrup to Sangye Ishi. From Sangye Ishi to Penchen Losang Chojen. From Penchen Losang Chojen to Drupkang Gele Gyatso or Koncho Gyaltsen. Not our great Gishi, Koncho Gyaltsen in Novaro. Maybe he's holder of it, we don't know. This is the documented history. In the case of Panchen Losang Chogen, he used to keep that text, in the typical Tibetan library, which all looks like pigeonholes. You even have one up here which looks typically like a Tibetan one. But the Tibetan one is dusty, full of cobwebs. And there must be termites. There's no concept of hygiene or cleanliness, but even that is a blessing. Tibetans are quite, gullible in that sense. In any case, Panchen Losang Chojen had his own library and he used to keep the text there. And his sacristan, caretaker of his shrine, used to always clean the shrine. He could not see the text. Nobody can see the text. It only materializes in front of the person who is qualified to receive it. He could not see the text, so he used to always complain and tell the Panchen Lama, because he was his attendant. He was saying, why do you keep this hole empty all the time, Just, are you keeping it empty for termites and insects to come inside? Why is it empty? Please do something. And Panchen Losang Chojen would say, don't you see my text is there? Can't you see it? He says, I don't know, Master, maybe your eyesight is failing or maybe there's something wrong because of your age, but I don't see anything. Please don't tell me there is a text over there. This was the case. And the recorded holder of the Ganden oral transmission emanated scripture is there up to probably Koncho Gyaltsen. So probably late until the 18th century, there is a record of who is the holder of Ganden oral transmission lineage. But from the 18th century down up to the 20th century, there is no record or no document of who holds it. Around the time of Pabongka Rinpoche and Sekung Dorje Chang, Pabongka Dechen Yingpo, our great master Pabongka Dechen Yingpo, in his secret biography, it is mentioned that Serkung Dorje Chang, a great teacher, Serkung Dorje Chang was the only Gelugpa master with a consort. Normally, if a Gelugpa Lama or a Gelugpa great adept takes up a consort, there is going to be many frowning and howling faces and many people criticizing and making fun and abusing it, because it's not like consort practice is a taboo. It is not like it is blasphemy. It's just that you need many qualifications to have to claim to be somebody who is going to take a consort practice. Just let me tell you something very simple about somebody who is going to become a practitioner who takes a consort. Either the guru advises the disciple to take a consort, or either the Dakinis themselves come and evoke the practitioner to take consort. Actually, Tsongkhapa himself was evoked by many Dakinis in Ganden. They came in the open sky and they sang Vajra songs, and Vajra songs are quite erotic songs. It sounds erotic, but the meaning is totally something else. So to a sexually frustrated person, it might sound very, 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 well, whatever, very filthy or whatever, But to the Siddha, Mahasiddha, it's about union of bliss and emptiness, okay? So Dakinis Dakas and Dakinis did come down at the time when Tsongkhapa had established the Ganden monastery and evoked him to take consort. And his disciple Khedubje and Jambal Gyatso could only see those Dakinis coming. Khedubje became very worried about what Tsongkhapa might respond to the Dakinis. But he couldn't hear because Tsongkhapa just looked up into the sky. He could see the Dakinis. Nobody around could see it. Later on, Khedubje went to the room of Tsongkhapa and made full 3-length prostrations to Tsongkhapa. And with tears in his eyes, and he said, "Today I saw what I saw, you also saw what you saw. But if you really decide that you are going to take a consort, you are going to destroy the sanctity of the purity of the Vinaya practice, which you worked so hard for. You created this purity of undefiled, pure monastic tradition of Buddha Shakyamuni for the first time in Tibet. And if you have decided to go and take consort, I make this petition, sincere petition from the depth of my heart, please don't do that." Khedubje made 3 full-length prostrations. Tsongkhapa smiled and said, "Now it's good that you are worried about it. I never even thought about it. I never even noticed. I just looked at them and I carried on. Did you see me talking to them?" "No, Master." "Don't worry, I have no intentions." So it is known that Tsongkhapa, if he wanted to take a consort, he could have done that while he was living. He was indeed the most qualified person in Tibet if he would take a consort. And if he would take a consort, he would reach enlightenment in one lifetime. He didn't do so. When he passed away, it is said in Bardo, in intermediate state, he took a consort and he reached enlightenment. And the signs were seen on his corporal form in Ganden, which remained in state. It transformed from a 67-year-old man into a 16-year-old youth, etc., with all the brilliance and light and shining, etc., and so forth. So since that time, it has become an exemplary, what you call, motto and principle in saying that the master did not do that. People say others took not 1 but 6, 10, 11, 12 consorts and may have been enlightened Buddhas, but left a landmark or a trademark for the disciples to make an excuse to womanize and to do whatever, So it is looked down at. It is not looked at with respect. It is not looked at with esteem or something very special. Normally, the gossip will always be that this is a fabricator, it's a hypocrite, it's somebody who has fantasy for the opposite sex, so that is why he's taken a consort as an excuse. In any case, who can be capable of taking a consort? Somebody who can drop fruits from a tree with the gaze of their eyes and make all of those fruits go back into the tree. At the same time, pee out of their lower private part, make it spring out and wet the ground completely so that the ground is completely wet, and then suck it back into the organ from there and make the ground dry once again. Such a person, if they can show that calibre, which they probably will only show it to those who are equally qualified, it's not a circus. It's not meant for people like us, but we have lamas, we have Mantraana initiations, but we know something about tantras. Please show it to me, I've never seen it. I don't think it's going to happen. Such a person will be capable of taking a consort. It is said that the 6th Dalai Lama had this capacity. There is this story that he peed from the top of the Potala, and you know how high Potala is. He peed from Potala right down into the dusty Standis soil down in the lower part of the hill, and that he pulled it up, but it is doubtful. It is doubtful because many things that Mahasiddha and great realized beings do, the Tibetan habit is always to plagiarize on that story and put it on their respective teachers and say, my teacher also did this, my teacher also discovered this. Because there is so much of fabrication, it is really difficult to trust a Tibetan. Did I say something wrong? No. Yeah, anyway.
Not much mention of women. I mean, you might have got a more enlightened consort, no?
Pardon?
Not much mention of women. Still very male-oriented.
That is not an issue right now. We can talk about that later. This is Ganden oral transmission in substance, okay? Ganden oral transmission in substance in the sense that it is the short lineage. It is the short transmission of the lineage, and there is the long transmission of the lineage, and the transmission in the other sense that the Ganden oral transmission tradition was all preserved in the miraculously emanated scripture, which has been passed by. And it is said that Sekung Dorje Chang held those teachings. Sekung Dorje Chang held that scripture. Where that information comes from is from the secret biography of Phabongka. We are overdue over time, but I want to finish the story if you don't mind. It will take me only 5 minutes. Phabongka Rinpoche actually wanted to visit Sekung Dorje Chang himself. He wanted to pay his respect to Sekung Dorje Chang himself because the Sekung Dorje Chang was considered to be a very great, highly realized adept. He was not just a highly realized adept, but he was also a first-class first geshe, meaning he had very high standard trainings, and he was reputed to be one of the creme de la creme amongst the geshis. So he was a first-class first geshe, means he was also very erudite and intellectual. Normally, mystical practitioners and adepts who have mystical sort of realizations and powers and things like that don't happen to have so much of classical education and study. It seems to be like that. The combination of all of these are very rare, and Tsongkhapa is only a few of them. Not many teachers have this combination. Either they are on the very non-classical side, sort of with mystical experiences, but authentic experiences, or either they are purely scholarly and intellectual, no mystical experiences, etc. It's always like that. So therefore, Sekung Dorje Chang was all of them. He was all of them. At the same time, he was very critical of Phabongka Rinpoche. He used to ostracize Phabongka Rinpoche occasionally during his public discourses. He used to make strong comments about Phabongka Rinpoche. Phabongka Rinpoche heard that he was being criticized in an audience of hundreds of thousands of people, that Sekung Rinpoche was expressing his disgust or sort of what you call irritation about something that he had done in public. So he felt a little bit intimidated. He felt that he wanted to go, but at the same time he thought if he appeared in the presence of hundreds of people during a teaching Sekung Dorje Chang was given, then he thought that Sekung Dorje Chang would have no choice but to say to him, "Get out," something like that, And it would be a total humiliation, not for him alone, but for his disciples. He had thousands of disciples, and they probably would get enraged. So he was thinking about that. Phabongka was not worried about his own reputation. He wanted very much to go to Sekung Dorje Chang, but he couldn't because of this reason. You understand this much of the story? Now, one night he had a dream. He had a very strong dream. And in that dream, he was climbing up a hill and a mountain, climbing, and he was trying to reach the hermitage of Sekung Dorje Chang. And he reached the outskirts, and he was totally out of breath because Phabongka was stout. In simple language, he was a fat, chubby person. He reached the hermitage, And when he reached it over there, Sekung Dorje Chang surprisingly seemed very inviting and very friendly. He said, "Oh, Rinpoche, why did you take all this pain to come all the way from your residence? My goodness, look at you. You are perspiring, you are sweating. Come inside, let's have a cup of tea." And then he made him sit down, Pabongka Rinpoche sit down on a slightly lower seat, and then just, normal talking, normal speaking. And then he said, "Well, I know what you've come for. Come, raise your head, just raise your head," he says. Because Pabongka was sitting in a lower, he was sitting with his head like this. He said, "Raise your head, let me see your face." And then he said, "Open your mouth. Open your mouth." When Pabongka Rinpoche opened his mouth, then Sekung Dorje Chang just gathered his spittle inside his mouth and he spat it inside the mouth. Now, if it was a different scenario and a different time, it would be seen as a big controversial thing. But times were different, occasion was different, and the reasons whereof for that kind of behavior was different. Sekung Dorje Chang just spat into the mouth of Pabongka, and it is said it is in this way he actually transmitted the Ganden oral transmission text to Sekung Dorje Chang. Some people say he spat on his head. There is also another narrative which say he spat directly into his mouth. It actually makes more sense. Pabongka Rinpoche digested it because Pabongka Rinpoche had no conceptions or two thoughts about, yucky, dirty, He had no two thoughts about it. He had no doubt. So he just sucked it. And this is how he actually received the Ganden oral transmission. And it is believed that this he would definitely pass down to his heart son and disciple, Kyabje Tshang Dorje Chang. And there are disciples of Kyabje Tshang Dorje Chang's disciple who believe that their own masters have received the Ganden oral transmission. The Ganden oral transmission is also not a book with a monopoly that it reaches only one realized person. It probably reaches many different persons in many different shapes and many different forms. There is no limit to talking about that, but I think with this much I would like to stop because we are now almost 7:20. The people who are looking across online must be thinking, what's wrong, or they probably, hopefully have enjoyed it. But I have tried to put it to the best of my capacities in my own way, the background and the history and what the Ganden oral transmission is all about. I think that it is very clear. If you have any questions and if you have any problems, you can always write them down. I have an email address, or you can contact me through other means or other channels, and I will try to answer to the best of my capacity if you have any further questions. Because given the limited scope of time, we can't carry on and on and on. Otherwise, I could have carried on until even 9, but that's not possible. Thank you very much for patiently hearing, and buonanotte, good night. 要我的